I'll go and talk for a couple of minutes.
Recording's active.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for attending this presentation. I am John Golsey, a professor at DeVry University and our IEEE student branch counselor. Tonight's presentation is sponsored by our student branch of IEEE and IEEE Columbus section and the Professional Activities Committee for Engineers, also known as PACE, and finally, the Power and Energy Society, PES. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Paul Berger, a professor at The Ohio State University and a visiting professor at Tampere University in Finland. I hope I pronounced it correctly.
Close enough.
Okay. Tampere. Paul has a very impressive bio. You have had a copy of it. I'm not going to read it verbatim. Instead, I'm going to say a few words that some of you may not know, and it's not on the bio. I've known him for about 15 years or more, less. He's a dedicated professor to his students. He loves his students, and vice versa. They highly speak of him. He has been involved in many student activities, and he's a great photographer, and I'm hoping to see some of his pictures in tonight's presentation. So without any further ado, here is Dr. Paul Berger.
Thank you, John, and thanks for forgoing the bio. That sometimes is very put offish. So, you know, IEEE is, so welcome everybody, and really thank you for coming. It's the evening, it's, you know, personal time in the evening here, and I guess I'm butting up against a presidential debate, but IEEE is conventionally thought of as a technical, you know, the electrical engineering technical aspects and so forth. But what is not as well understood is that IEEE has been doing a lot of humanitarian activities around the globe, and so this is a snapshot of some of the things that I've been involved in, and you'll kind of see a timeline of how things evolved for me, at least, of getting into this. And a lot of these are solar related, not all. Some of them are completed projects. Some of them are ongoing projects, and some of them are new projects that are in the making. So I'll go as long as there's time allotment. I probably won't finish everything, but let's just go through, and I'm keeping my eye on the chat box. So if you have a question, feel free to hit the chat box. I'm glancing over occasionally at the chat. And my video is on, although I think the main presentation is showing my PowerPoint slides, but you can see me gesticulate if you like on the side as well. So Haiti, Colombia, Tanzania, and you know, we always feel this need to go abroad, but you know, there's a lot of homegrown projects that need to be that are needed and can be challenged here locally. And then we have I have a new project that I've been being arm twisted for, that's brewing in Zambia, and I'll try and talk a little bit about that as that goes on. So to begin with, as many of you know, I'm, you know, hyperactive with the student organizations. I think at my apex, I was running 4 student clubs. They had to actually make a special exemption for me at the student organization at the Ohio Student Union, because normally it's limited to 3. And so this is one of the clubs, Solar Education and Outreach. And its inception, it happened predating me. I mean, I was here at Ohio State, but I was not a part of the inception. There was a solar decathlon, and this is a picture here. Can you see my mouse cursor?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, on Zoom, okay. On Zoom, you can see my mouse cursor. But in the upper left-hand corner is a picture of the Washington, D.C. Mall in front of the Smithsonian. And if you kind of look a little, squint a little bit, you'll see these little homes with solar panels on the roof and so forth. These were different contestants. It's called the Solar Decathlon. It started in Washington, D.C. in 2009. And to the right, you see a picture of the Ohio State team that participated in the first solar decathlon. Now they didn't win, but they participated, and here's the house that they. So usually build it at your campus, and then it's modular, and you break it down, you move it to Washington D.C., and you reassemble it on the mall, and they have judging. So it's not just solar; it's like passive thermal. It's like all the kind of little wisdoms that you can do to make your home more sustainable, more off the grid. And so after they came back, the students were so jazzed, and Solar Decathlon is a huge undertaking by the Department of Energy. So this contest does not run every year. The students were really jazzed about doing something solar related, but they had no venue. And so somehow, and this part of the equation I don't understand, I was, because I was not there, somehow this group coalesced and formed a solar education outreach club, and they learned of an education professor at a satellite campus that would go to Haiti for an alternative spring break. And she would go and do take education majors and do an education retreat. And the engineers and associated engineers would go down and do these solar projects at remote schools in Haiti. But there wasn't a lot of technology related to it. There wasn't a lot of training. The course they were taking was not engineering centric, and so there was some growing pains. So around 2009, I think. Sorry, around 2010, the I was invited to become the no, it was after that. Sorry, I was invited by the president of Solar Education Outreach to become the new faculty advisor. And during that tenure that I was part of it, I moved it into the College of Engineering. College of Engineering kicks in $1,000 to subsidize the students, and we started to add more technical content. So everything was going fairly harmoniously. Here's some of the snapshots. These are not mine. Haiti Solar Project by the Solar Education Outreach Club. It ran for 6 years from 2010 to 2015. And so here's one incarnation. So a lot of times it was remote schools. Here's another one towards the end of this tenure. They're getting ready to put on a house here, the solar panels. They're working with the community to do this. And here's they're installing it on the rooftop and so forth. And it's a blending of the OSU students and the people down there. Here's one of the write-ups in our departmental newsletter here, and the guy on the very left was the president at the time of Solar Education Outreach, and you can see some salient quotes here. Amanda Brosius is the young woman on the upper right-hand corner on the rooftop there, and you can see the little red rectangle circling a quotation that she delivered for this news story. And so I just want to read this. It kind of captures the element here. So Dean thanked us for not bringing money, but for bringing education. Brosius said the money is gone instantly, spent on nothing really, but the education will last, and they can really do something with that. And so not only were they delivering the solar panels and the electricity and allowing students to perhaps study at night, which they were not able to before. Remember, Haiti was leveled by several hurricanes, so and earthquakes, and so there wasn't a lot of infrastructure. But they were teaching both that you saw some of the pictures showing peer people in the community, peer age group, but there were also the younger kids. And I heard one story where they had the OSU students did a play where they were teaching about solar energy, and they had half the kids dress up as pretend to be electrons, and the other half pretend to be holes, and they had them run around showing how the movement of current through the circuit, and you know, so it was a good learning experience. It was working together. And often we were trying to involve local universities in Haiti, and more about that later. So anyway, but then there's several things happened. OSU switched to semesters in the autumn of 2012. That made it difficult to go as an alternative spring break, because before you had the winter quarter was over and the spring quarter had not begun. And so it was easy for students to get away for a week, to do this project and come and return. Now that it's in the middle of a whole semester, it became very daunting. A lot of times professors would give big take-home projects to do. And so it wasn't a clean break. Also, the in-country contacts seemed to vacillate every single year. There was a different in-country contact. In the beginning, by the way, they were doing it incorrectly if you're doing service learning. Actually, the very first time that I was involved in this, the students bought the solar panels and the key equipment here in Columbus, Ohio, and took it down on the plane with them. And that's not really the proper way to do service learning. You should be working in country. You should be creating an opportunity that the in-country people can learn from this dynamic and be able to replicate it. And so if you're bringing the key materials from outside the community, then that breaks that ability. There were some safety issues because there was less of a technical content to the program. And so one student almost got hurt. No one did get hurt, but it was not so good. So eventually OSU curtailed the operations in Haiti. So then I'll bait you here a little bit. This will come up later. IEEE, as I was mentioning, is very involved in humanitarian activities around the world. There's 3 levels of funding. One is called SITE. That's kind of the baby embryonic kind of groups. It's called Special Interest Group on Humanitarian Technology. They're roughly budgets between $1,000 and $999, as you see. Then the medium-sized ones are called Humanitarian Activities Committee, HAC, and those budgets go for between 20 and 60K. Now, if you really want to go to the big boys, then you go to the Smart Village. And that is mapping onto it that everything that you deliver is sustainable. So whatever enterprise you're trying to deliver has a way that it can continue to replenish itself without outside resources being delivered to it. And so that makes it much harder. So something like putting solar panels on a school, there's no way to really generate that sustainability there. So no direct way, let me say. So for 2016, 2017, 2018, we were without a country. Solar education, question? Okay. Solar education and outreach was without a country, no place to go. And here's a map of the world. And so I was still under the frame of mind that it should be a spring break kind of activity. So that really meant 1 week duration. And so you can think of sort of a radius enveloping, you know, Columbus, Ohio, but kind of centered, you know, skewed towards Latin and South America. And that's kind of your striking distance where you could go. Now, I've got contacts all around the world through my work in IEEE as a distinguished lecturer and so forth. I tried to put something together in Brazil, but Brazil is starting to get to be the periphery of that circle. And the university I knew was in Sao Paulo, and the project I knew was up in the Amazon, and was just too far away from each other. And so we tried different things. And so for 3 countries, we were countryless. Eventually, something galvanized. And as I was putting things together, what ended up happening is we ended up splitting into 2 projects. More about that soon. So to make emphasis, service learning really should be not only the outgoing students, but it should be the local stakeholders. And generally, you want to interface with a peer group like a local university so that the outgoing OSU students have ability to work with local stakeholders in the community, maybe a school, teachers and student and younger students, as well as their peer college students. So, but one of the things in all of this is really was very cautious in going forward, because I don't want to just parachute in privilege, take some selfies and leave. A lot of these service learning projects for OSU students to participate actually are quite expensive. And so by that very nature, it filters out the students that can afford this and cannot afford this. And so in the early days of Solar Education Outreach, we were doing tremendous fundraising to try to offset those costs so that we could open it up to more people to participate. And I would still like to try to do that, but that's hard. I think everybody has their handout for these kind of activities, and it's getting harder. And once it moved into the College of Engineering stopped donating because they're already subsidizing all the students by $1,000 each. So it's gotten harder to fundraise for these kind of activities. But I do want to kind of make sure that we're doing this in a proper way, and more about that later as well. So we eventually bifurcated into 2 projects. And here you can see the red star indicates where we were in Haiti, and then you can see the blue stars indicating where we are now in some of the projects I'm working on. So as we went through having no country, eventually we started to split. And one serendipity activity was OSU has a very vibrant entity called the Global Water Institute. It used to be at the university level, and now, actually about a year ago, it moved into the College of Engineering. And the Global Water Institute was, by serendipity, was asked to dig a water well at a Tanzanian orphanage. And the Tanzanian orphanage, when they were on the premises, was communicating to them their needs. And the College of Engineering knew that I was on a quest for a solar inspired solar service learning project somewhere on the planet. And so word filtered back to me that would I be interested in performing a solar engineering service learning project in Tanzania? And that eventually galvanized, and that ran 1 iteration. It would have been 2 by now, but coronavirus blocked us in 2020. But we ran this to completion, and I will share with you the story of what we did in 2019. And we aim to do this again and again and again annually. More about this later in another tranche of this presentation, but eventually I did make my way into Colombia, and I'll talk about that later. But so it really I went from 1 project to no projects to 2 projects. So let's drill down in Tanzania. So one of the things that happened that really kind of broke the rules of what I was trying to map onto before is, let's not think of a spring breakout, but in the new semester system at OSU, for engineers, there's a Maymester is the nickname coined for it. May doesn't really belong in the summer semester, nor does it belong in the spring semester. It's kind of neither here nor there. And so May has started to proliferate as an opportunity for being able to do service learning projects where you're able to go farther in the world and stay for longer. And that's exactly what we did. Obviously, Tanzania is outside that bounded circle. So here's Tanzania. Maybe some of you, many of you may not be as familiar with Tanzania. I can't say I was overly familiar. Lake Victoria, the origin of the Nile, is up there in the upper left-hand corner. You got Kenya to the north. And here's a little bounded circle showing you kind of basically the area we were. So we actually flew in to Mount Kilimanjaro Airport. Mount Kilimanjaro area is set up for a lot of tourism, so they got a nice international airport there. We flew into Mount Kilimanjaro Airport, and then we traveled over to Arusha, Tanzania. And so overarching theme is, again, I want to emphasize, do not parachute in this white privilege and take some selfies with locals to post on social media. Performed with sensitivity and cooperation with local stakeholders. So almost every workday evening, and less exhausted, was an after dinner reflection to discuss what we had seen and experienced. So here I'm showing you 3 pictures. One is the front entrance of Camp Joshua, which is an orphanage, but also a primary school. And so for those of you not familiar, primary school in the British system is essentially 1st grade through 6th grade, and then the secondary would be your what we would think of as middle school and high school merged together. So this is a primary school. This is the guest house where we stayed with the students, the resident directors, resident assistant, and the students. And there's our dinner table where we would eat meals together, and we would often reflect and discuss things of importance around the dinner table and the next day's agenda. But then we would retire to these soft, comfy couches, and some students would sit on the pillows, and we would go around in a circle and do reflections. And we would make sure that the students really started to internalize all these things that they had witnessed. Now, recognize that some of these students maybe had never had a passport before, never traveled much. Some had traveled extensively. It was quite a wide range, but we wanted to make sure that everybody was seeing things in the proper way. And I was very much blessed with having a resident assistant, Turner Adornetto, who you'll see soon in pictures, who was a born fellowship winner. And so he had not only learned Swahili, he was fluent in Swahili, but part of his born fellowship, he had lived in Arusha, Tanzania. And while he was in Arusha, Tanzania, he had worked for a German solar company. So he was really a trifecta of experience and knowledge that was really quite a blessing to make this go so well. So one of the key takeaways as we brought the students through all of this is that empathy can be learned. Everyone thinks that empathy is a trait that is intrinsic to us and our upbringing or our DNA, but really empathy is a trait that can be learned. And so I think this really opened up everyone's eyes. Some people were already on the right page. It's kind of like watching Best Marigold Hotel, if you've ever seen that movie. And you see everyone's reactions to being transplanted into India, and you see the different reactions that everybody has. And it's kind of similar here. Hopefully everyone has a positive reaction, and we were there to guide everyone as best possible. So here's Camp Joshua, right? It's a group of students. There's Mama Wamboro, who's the matriarch of the whole enterprise. She and her husband run a couple orphanages and schools and medical clinics around the country in that geographic area. Here's the students, and now some of the students are of the primary school aged, and some of the students who had finished primary school under their tutelage had tested high enough on their exams that they were able to go to secondary school. And so in the lower left-hand corner, do you see the one student smiling? Lower left-hand corner, the student in the middle, Kevin. Kevin was actually a secondary student, so he was not actually a student at Camp Joshua anymore. He had graduated. He tested into the secondary school, and Kevin became one of my close friends there. I was astounded by his competency in science. I actually was starting to teach him about quantum mechanics before I left, and I still communicate through his mother's mobile phone intermittently, but I actually was really smitten by Kevin, his aptitude, his knowledge. He would make a great engineer. So long term, we're trying to build maybe a memorandum of understanding where we can facilitate some of the graduates of Camp Joshua when they become college age of possibly coming to Ohio State and spending a semester abroad. So that's something I'm working on in the background. Here's the school. In the center there is the headmaster of the school, and to the right is one of his teachers. But look at the graffiti that they have on the walls, right? They don't have a whole lot of, they have blackboard. Don't really have projectors per se, but they use every little space they can to teach everyone fundamentals. Now, I challenge you to ask a primary school aged kid in the United States to be able to tell you about the different parts of a sensory neuron. I mean, it was really blown away by the level of sophistication that was juxtaposed with their living conditions. So it's really quite amazing. And here you can see one of their chalkboard lessons that had been delivered earlier in the day. So it's really an amazing place. Here's kind of an amalgam of pictures at the end of the project and the beginning of the project. So there you see our 8 students. You see our 2 drivers with the Dala Dala. We had a Dala Dala, which is a local bus that that can fit about 10, 11 people. And so the 2 Dala Dala drivers, we had Moses, who's kind of kneeling a bit in the front row, who's our in-country contact, who does all the facilitating, scheduling of things. And there's Turner Adornetto, who's just a key asset in this Tanzania project. And there we are, kind of jumping ahead, but these are the Maasai warrior blankets that they bestowed on all of us when we completed the project as a gift in response. This is on the picture on the left is Mount Meru. It's another volcano in the same chain as Mount Kilimanjaro. And so from the Camp Joshua premises, you can see this volcano looming when you had clear, and we climbed up that part way up that mountain at one point. So it was quite a large chore because we brought in 8 students. They'd never met each other before, except maybe 2 had met each other before, of all different engineering disciplines. In fact, one was environmental science, so not even fully a bona fide engineer. So they had a range. Some were seniors, some were sophomores. So, some experience, but many without any electrical engineering or solar experience. 5 of them did not. One did not even know what Ohm's law is, which may be heresy to you IEEE people out there. V equals IR. One had only completed their freshman year. So quite a range. And the challenge for Turner and I is we had to parachute them in. Sorry to recycle that same terminology, but we bring them into this foreign country with minimal technical preparation. Mostly, we had a few weeks in preparation, but it was mostly concerning do's, don'ts, preparation of getting their visa. They need a visa to go to Tanzania, indoctrinating them on the culture, and Turner gave them some rudimentary Swahili lessons so that would help break the ice with the locals. So we plopped these students in there. They had to learn what is a solar power system. They had to design a solar power system. They had to build a solar power system, and they had to install a solar power system, all in 10 working days. Now, that's quite a chore under the conditions there. And there we are in the Dala Dala, by the way, all of us headed off for a day's work. So quite an undertaking, but they managed to pull this off with great astuteness. So one of the things we ended up doing, well, this is the specifics. So they decided, they spoke with the teachers. So in the boys' dormitory, there was no lighting. So this is what we ended up doing, was providing solar panel and DC powered LED lighting for the boys' dormitory, which had no previous lighting. So the students, the boys, would have to get up in darkness and go to sleep in complete darkness, and so it was kind of a disaster. So this was really from darkness into lightness. And so they did a survey. So some of the older teachers sleep in the dormitory with them. It's kind of like camp counselors, and everybody's there's stacked with bunk beds throughout the dormitory, with a shower area and a dressing area and so forth. And so they canvassed and decided how many bulbs they needed in each location. They counted up 30 different bulbs. Then with that, they did an estimate of the usage. So they had how many watt hours before losses. And then we were using a 12-volt battery system. So then what that needs about 87 amp hours to charge with the amount of anticipated usage for each of those areas during the daily activities. And then you usually over-engineer, design a system. But what if you had 2 days of inclement weather? You'd have to have the batteries be able to store enough. So in the end, back of the envelope calculations, we decided to get two 200 amp hour batteries for the system, and we got two 300-watt solar panels. Might have been 300, might have been 325, something like that. They usually vary around there. I think these ones were 300. So here's the students they're designing, and really primitive tools that were available to us. We brought very few things with us. Here they're using a hacksaw, which is the dullest blade I've ever seen. It was just horrible. Here they're cutting through this plastic using a soldering iron. They're drilling holes with a soldering iron because we didn't have a drill. And I mentioned how some of the secondary students, as some of the students graduate and go on to secondary school. So some of those students are brought back in that they can sleep at Camp Joshua, but they act as sort of camp counselors for the younger kids. So this in the third picture from the left, you'll see one of the Camp Joshua residents who's a secondary school teacher. So he sleeps there and he's helping out. So this is the co-integration, and there's many other pictures where they started helping and learning from everybody. And here's the students that are the OSU students that designed this battery box, and here they're installing. And so in this design system, they're basically using parts related to a PVC plumbing system, because these wires, you don't want the students to jump up on the bunk beds and touch the wires and get electrocuted or anything. So all of the wires were housed into PVC piping and then fixed to the walls and ceilings and so forth. And so everything's protected and designed in their, the native language is, I see the chat box, Saul. The native language is Swahili, but the students on the premises are very, very fluent in English, so you can speak to them in both. But they really get, it's very disarming to be able to speak to them with a few salient Swahili phrases. And so here's the circuit for the electrical engineers. Here's the construction. You can see the top of the boys' dormitory, a lot of mud. It was kind of a part of it. The period we were there was very rainy. Here's the battery box and its completed incarnation. Here's the metal frame for that will later receive the solar panels on the roof. There's one of our students, Zeke, doing some of the wiring into the light box. So this is kind of a smattering of some of the construction. So again, the school is off to the left, not shown. There's a girls' dormitory closer to the center square, a little more protected. And this boys' dormitory is kind of right in front of the soccer field, is actually. So here's kind of the completed entity. You can see the solar panels are in place. Here you can see the DC light bulb into its socket, and you can see how the PVC piping is going, snaking through the rafters here. Sometimes just a zip tie to hold it on. Here's the students. We're deliberating with some of the teachers. And there you can see the LEDs being illuminated for the project. The other thing we did is we didn't want to just do this. So using the knowledge that Turner had developed and cultivated with having gone there before. He was aware of many innovators in Tanzania. So during the trip, we interrupted those 10 working days to go visit various innovators. One I'm going to highlight to you is Alfred. Alfred is a very accomplished farmer, and he has a bioreactor. And Ernest is a self-taught repair shop, repairing all kinds of electronics. And I just want to show you the fierce ingenuity there. And also, I want to emphasize, I didn't point out this thing, is don't bring a colonialist solution. So when we left Columbus, Ohio, we were anticipating delivering an AC solution using AC lighting. We were going to put solar panels. We were going to have an inverter and do everything kind of, you know, the American way. No, you have to be able to learn what is in the country, listen, and we went to some solar shops. There are some shops, electrical shops, that sell batteries and solar panels and stuff and parts for motorcycles and things, kind of amalgam. And we quickly learned in talking to some of the shopkeepers that in Africa, the inverter quality is really subpar. That China has got a reputation there of dumping a lot of inferior electronics onto the market there. And if you try to do an AC powered system that in the heat of and humidity of this Tanzania community, that the inverters would fail within a few weeks, if not months. So we had to rethink everything and go to a DC only system. So those wires were quite thick, right? And so they're a limited throw distance and so forth. So we had to think about that and change our perspective. So you have to not force your solution onto them, but work with the community. So you also want to involve local stakeholders to complete the triangle. So we, as I mentioned before, we worked with many teachers at Camp Joshua. Oh, sorry, I got a typo there, but future aim to work beside Arusha Technical College. So if we had gone in 2020, we were going to be working at a farm that was started by Camp Joshua. Had bought a parcel of land outside of Arusha, and they were doing farming. So they wanted to bring a better diet for the orphans at the orphanage, but they also wanted to generate a little bit of an income to support the things, the commodities that they need to buy for the functionality of the orphanage. So so this in 2020, we were going to do take 10 OSU students and 10 Arusha Technical College students and have them work together in teams. So here's some of the ingenuity. Here's Alfred at his farm. He has a bioreactor that he built. It's buried in the ground, and he collects essentially the cow dung and the cow urinations and feeds it into a funnel into his bioreactor, and where it ferments, and then he brings methane back into his home, and his family does all their cooking with the methane generated by the bioreactor. And there's many other farms that have replicated. And here he's very proud, showing a certificate that he was labeled the best farmer in that general community. One of the OSU students naively said, "Oh, Alfred, why do you only have 3 cows? Why not get why not get some more cows?" He goes, "I don't need more cows. This number of cows generates enough milk for my family, and it generates enough methane for my cooking. I don't need any more." And this is not the American way. We always want more, more, more. And so here he was working symbiotically with the community, and he was only taking what he needed. Here's the Ernest in the bottom. He's self-taught. I'm not even sure Ernest had a high school degree. He learned how to take electronics apart and put it back together. And so he had never met an electronic device that he could not repair. These are VCRs and television sets and radios and so forth. He essentially has, in this little tiny shop, he has a graveyard of old components, and he can go through without even knowing how these transistors work. He can go through and he can basically data mine and harvest a good transistor on a broken board, and it's compliant enough with the specifications of the broken transistor on a circuit board, and he just solders that out and solders the new one in, or the slightly used, and voila, it's working. And he's never been classically trained. In fact, Ernest always has about 2 or 3 students, I would call them students, who are understudies, who's he is teaching to be able to proliferate this trade, and they can go back to their respective communities and train others. That battery box that you saw fabricated earlier, this is it being made in process, and this is really innovative, that in Tanzania, this was an all-female-owned welding shop. The women were the bosses, and the men were doing the labor, and so it was a really interesting inversion. In the middle here is a solar kit. This is the company Turner used to worked for when he was in Arusha, and they're a German-based company, and they sell these little kits where with a small solar panel, you get a solar panel, you get a battery, and you get a television set all in one. And it's very clever. It's all you have to do is pay with a fee through your cell phone, and when you run out of minutes, your system is disabled. There's a kill switch that they send from the central office, and so then you have to pay, put so many credits back onto your television set, and then they reactivate. And so that's kind of an interesting business model there. Here's Arusha Technical College. Unfortunately, we visited them towards the end of the trip, and this is what we wanted to cultivate and stitch them together to work together. Here's one of the little homes that they were teaching some of their students. It's a little home, maybe about 2.5 feet tall, but you can see how they were using this as a mock-up to teach them how to do electrical wiring and so forth. So I think that was kind of a first or second year kind of project for some of them. Now, we did have fun. So we basically, the rule of thumb was we worked Monday through Friday, and on the weekends, we went exploring. So on the first week, we only had 2 weekends to circumnavigate. On the first weekend, we went into the Arusha and we visited the marketplace. There's a few snapshots of random around Arusha. And then we also went on this hike, very rigorous hike, by the way, up to this amazing waterfall on Mount Meru, this volcano. And here you can see the students doing the OHIO. Saul, yes, we had a medical insurance. We had a hospital that had been pre-identified. The university really knows how to do this very, very well. So it was all set up in advance. We knew exactly where to go. We had geo global insurance cards and everything. So here's Tanzania. And then the second weekend, I annotated this with some red arrows. And you can see we basically did a counterclockwise loop where we visited Torengere National Park on Saturday, and then we went to Ngoro Conservation Area on Sunday. Amazing places. Here's some of my pictures from our excursions. These we had a family of elephants come right by. We saw many lions. So we had an amazing visit in the. I think I see another typo. And we had an amazing visit. Ngoro crater is actually an old volcano, massive volcano that collapsed, and many animals over the years have been trapped into there. And so it's almost like a little Jurassic Park with all these animals. And inside the crater, there's so much food and water that none of the animals want to leave. But if ever there was a famine, some sort of a huge drought, probably you would have all these elephants and lions and zebras and so forth coming out of the crater into the communities adjacent. But they're all happy, they're content, and so it's the only wildlife there that actually does not migrate. You hear, because just to the north is the Great Serengeti Plain, and there we hear often about the great migrations that go there. These animals don't migrate. This is actually in the crater. This is an elephant just chomping away on the nice grassland there, and came right up and so forth. So many amazing. The students were really mesmerized. Um, so now I want to segue over. I kind of lost track on time, but I want to segue over to the Colombia project. So while I was without a project in a country for 3 years, I started to explore the opportunity of doing something in Colombia. And Fernando Guarin is an old friend of mine. I used to collaborate and publish with him in the 1990s. And he was actually president of my Electron Device Society in IEEE in 2018 and 2019. And Fernando, as you can tell by, although he works at IBM and now Global Foundries in East Fishkill, New York, you can tell by his name, he was actually born in Colombia. So when he was president and leading up to, while he was president-elect, he was very proud to show off his native country, and so he established many lecture opportunities. And as a distinguished lecturer, I got invited. So I gave a lecture in 2016 in Bogota and another one in Puebla, Mexico, but then I visited Colombia afterwards in 2017. We did a mid-year meeting of our Board of Governors. By that time, I was on the Board of Governors. And we met in Cartagena. And then even in 2019, we're in Armenia. That's not Armenia, the country, where we have the flare-up of activities. This is Armenia in Colombia, which is kind of the center of the coffee triangle there. And in all those trips, I really started to bond with a particular university there, and an idea really started to take shape. And I presented this to my solar education outreach officers, who the officers by then had actually completely forgotten the Haiti legacy. The Haiti trips had happened so long ago with this 3-year hiatus that the student officers really were not aware of that culture and that annual event. And they, after having our Haiti trip curtailed, they were reticent to go to Colombia because they had heard things about Colombia and the FARC and things and so forth. And I'm quite adventurous. And so I was, in fact, right around that time, the president of Colombia won the Nobel Peace Prize for a truce agreement with the FARC. So I was not troubled by it, but they were. And that's why I ended up going to Tanzania instead. But the train had left the station. I was working so harmoniously with this university down there that we ended up, I wrote a proposal to the IEEE HAC board, that medium-sized project allocation that I indicated earlier, and we were awarded money for that. And that project is a solar-powered desalinization plant for the indigenous Wayuu Indians in La Guajira. So we normally think of Colombia as being a tropical rainforest, but there's a peninsula that sticks out into the Caribbean that is sticks out over by Venezuela, and it's a desert. It's like 30, 35-foot tall saguaro cactus. You expect a roadrunner to be speeding by you or so forth, and Wile E. Coyote. It's very otherworldly. And this place was under the ocean a millennia ago. So when plate tectonics moved it up to land, the soil is still saturated to this day with sea salt. So if you dig a water well for a community, that water comes up brackish, and so it's very with the salty-ish water. This is very hard on elderly and children. And so we were going to install a solar-powered water desalinization plant. So this is this project. Mauricio Pardo is the head of the electrical engineering department at Universidad del Norte in Barranquilla, which is kind of the largest largest city near La Guajira. And here you can see I'm already planning towards that smart village tranche of money. So I even cleverly named the title. This is the name of the project, Towards the Smart Village Through Solar Powered Desalinization. And I asked for 60,000 US dollars, and I received 48,000 from HIC. Now, key takeaway number 2 is low-income communities, country communities that have little to no pre-existing electrical infrastructure do have a chance to leapfrog into the 21st century bypassing fossil fuels. So this whole La Guajira Peninsula, which is mostly land given for the indigenous Wayuu, kind of a similar action that happened here in the United States, where we herded everyone, all the Indian nations out to like the Dakotas and places where we didn't think were really of a high value. They herded them over to the La Guajira Peninsula. Turns out, kind of similar to the Dakotas, they actually discovered all kinds of they discovered coal and other precious metals in the lands there, and of course, the mining companies are taking those raw materials from the land. The indigenous Wayuu are not benefiting much from it, and it's contributing to added contamination of their groundwater. This is a little too verbose to go over, but these are the 3 main stakeholders. There's myself, Mauricio Pardo, and then our main contact in La Guajira is Neil Mendez, who works with SENA, which is one of the trade schools. There's a trade school network in Colombia, and so we would be working with Neil Mendez. So here's the map of Colombia. You can see way up in the top is that little peninsula sticking out towards Venezuela. That's where we would be running this project. Let me see. Monica, is there any plans to return to Haiti? Or yes, Haiti is done and replaced with Tanzania. What happens if there is more than a couple of days? Well, then the lights go out. that's if that's all the energy you store in the batteries, then the lights go out and you gotta wait. But that's over engineering, and these places are usually, even on a cloudy day, you're going to get some sunlight. So here's Colombia, kind of orient you a little bit. So this is the UNANorte, Universidad del Norte, or UNANorte, and they have a very rich and vibrant IEEE student chapter. And so here we are with the students getting ready. So we asked HAC for 60K, and we got 48K. So Universidad del Norte, through its EE faculty and associated labs, and so it was kind of the 3 stakeholders, and then we're working with the Wayuu community. So here is my pilgrimage out to La Guajira before we wrote the proposal. And so there's me and Neil Mendez, who's my point of contact, our point of contact in La Guajira. He lives in the Rio Hocha area, which is adjacent to the Wayuu people's lands. And there you can see the piles of salt, right? That's how salty the land is to have actual piles of salt. And so here's Neil. We were meeting with some of the villagers there. In the lower left-hand corner, here you see the gentleman in the red polo shirt is one of the village elders, one of the Wayuu village elders. I guess in the United States, we would call him the chief. And here are a bunch of the women, and their only revenue there is to do basket weaving. They do these precious weaving of baskets and purses and things like that. And that's really about their only source of income. These are the people that are impacted. As I said, the brackish water is very, very harsh for the elderly and the children. Here you can see this wonderful little smiling girl is in their school was not in session, but this is their schoolhouse, and it's this mud wall. And so this is the community they live. Very stark kind of environment there. Here they are, all the people around in a circle, and they're doing their weaving. They're practicing their trades, and they're weaving together. And here's some of the one of the baskets that they've been weaving. They have these vibrant colors with these geometric shapes, and that's really their way of business. Now there's limited solar there. I did happen to find one solar panel driving what looked to be a satellite TV, but that's not really what they're about. And I don't think I have time to go into it, but I was really mesmerized by what this village elder had for their long-term vision of what that community was going to be. They had really put a lot of thought into how to preserve their community and so forth, and it was really I was really blown away by the way they were going to do things. Now there's limited solar. You can see some solar panels in the background there by that cow. Those solar panels are only used to bring up water from underground, and it's delivered into this basically swimming pool. And they actually had me drink a cup of water from this. And I'll be honest with you, I had some stomach problems the next day. I won't go into detail, but this is what they're drinking, and I just felt, if they're drinking it on a daily basis, I should understand where they're coming from. So what's the projected? Helen, that is in a state of flux as budget cuts and various things. I'll talk about that a little bit. So originally, the original proposal was very ambitious. We were going to put up 30 panels, 325 watts each. We were going to generate 9.75 kilowatts, and that would be about 58 kilowatt hours of energy at the La Guajira site. We were going to run reverse osmosis, double membrane. There's a system out of Australia. So, by the way, reverse osmosis for drinking water, probably Israel and Australia are kind of your best performers for that kind of technology because they're so accustomed to that living in arid conditions. So we're buying our reverse osmosis unit from Australia, and 4 of these running in parallel would generate something like 180 liters an hour, and each 1.5 horsepower pump would require 744 watts. And so altogether, we were thinking, oh man, I could generate 17,000 liters per day. I'm just going to be creating swimming pools of drinkable water. And normally by the United Nations, it recommends about 100 liters per day. Really, the YU knowing how to conserve water. It's almost like the Fremen in Dune, if you're familiar with the science fiction series about Dune. So they're probably more frugal on water than the Fremen. So we were guesstimating 50 liters per day, but they could probably they probably work with much less. That would probably facilitate up to 345 community members. And now decorated along the La Guajira Peninsula are different, what they call rancheros, or I guess we might think of them as villages, different rancheros of different YU communities that are decorated all up and down the peninsula. So we were going to start with one community, and that's what I was making reference to, the fact that they have really no infrastructure for electrical, is that I see opportunity to return there again and again and again and kind of build that out into a smart grid system and work all the way from the southern end of the peninsula and work all the way up to the northern end. Now, reality hits when you get the funding, you start to run the project, and you realize, oh my goodness, I can't deliver what I had promised. So we had a budget cut. How does that change your design idea? I had tried to pitch an idea where we were going to be using used laptop batteries. I'd been Googling around. There was some stuff about used laptop batteries. You can essentially build your own Tesla Powerwall. And so then as I tried to obtain used laptop batteries in Colombia, it just became impossible. They're just, even though Colombia was the first Latin American country to adopt a formal e-waste policy, there just was no treasure trove of discarded laptop batteries that we could raid, and it just didn't seem to be worthwhile. So all of a sudden, when we came out to really make the battery packs necessary, we would need 7,800 used laptop batteries. That just wasn't viable. So now you have to go to, say, a lithium phosphate solution that can be quite expensive, and so then another key element is you do have to work with the stakeholders. I'm trying to emphasize that with the Haiti and Tanzania projects. So after we left La Guajira, the community members had a serious discussion, and they were wondering why this ranchero would get the water and that ranchero did not. And so the different rancheros were fighting among themselves. So all of a sudden it got mapped onto our design. We had to either move the water or move the system. And I kept on pressing upon them, let's just make a stationary system and move the water. We'll buy a water truck and move it from this ranchero to that. We'll do the filtration in one single location and move the water around, right? Makes perfect sense to us engineers. No, it does not work in the community, because in that arid community, the water that you take up in one ranchero community's land, that water that comes up on that land belongs to that ranchero. And you would never be allowed to take the water from that ranchero and give it to an adjacent ranchero. That is sacrilegious. So here we had to then design a system where the system itself is portable. And now that really creates a huge constraint on the engineering design. And by the way, this thing towards sustainability of a smart village, this is what their shoreline looks like. It is beautiful Caribbean beach, hardly any developments. There's no hotels, there's nothing, because it's so arid, there's not even enough water to really run a proper restaurant. And so they could be, the YU could be fostering ecotourism, where that could really generate a sustainable income for them. But, you know, people from the Western world coming down there for a holiday, I think they're going to have a certain level of needs and expectations. And so really, you're going to have to build quite an electrical infrastructure, water infrastructure, before you can really start to foster a lot of this. So here's a little bit about the La Guajira Peninsula. This is an electrical diagram of some of the grid lines going up. Now, eventually we had that budget cut, but I've also gotten additional tranches of money from my home society within IEEE, the Electron Device Society. So I got 15K in 2020, and I just got another 10K. So we're trying to build this out and address some of the unexpected deliverables. So that was kind of the Colombia. Now, so I was going down, so on spring break, I went down to Colombia on March 8th of this year, now to start to implement that plan of attack. And so March 8th, think back in our timeline of coronavirus. On March 8th, I arrived in Colombia, working with the university. And the following week, I arrived on a weekend, and the following, early in the week, my flight home got canceled. I was too busy working with the university. I didn't think much about it. And I said, oh, my flight's not, home is until later. I'll worry about that later. Well, by the time I thought about it, it turned out that the president of Colombia had closed the borders, and I was trapped. I was trapped in South America, Colombia, for 128 days. And so, by the way, this is the portable water that we're trying to deliver. We're trying to make some sort of an amalgam of a system with a crate, and then have solar panels flip up like an umbrella, and we can drag this around on a trailer behind a truck of some sort. So this is what we're aspiring towards. This is what was delivered. We were able to acquire a donated container. As you can see, it's a very heavily used container with a lot of rust, maybe a few holes. And this thing is a monster. It's 2.2 tons empty. In fact, that forklift that was used to take it up off the truck bed and put it on the ground there, that forklift is only rated for 2 tons. So how do they solve these dilemmas in South America? They get 4 or 5 guys to hang on the back of the forklift to counterweight it. So they just, brute forced it. They lifted it up off the flatbed and dropped it on the ground there, and that is where it's sitting right now to this day, because I was not able to do anything further on it at that particular time because of my exile. So for 128 days, that was my view across the Barranquilla city. This is a little more southern portion of Barranquilla. Beautiful sunsets on many occasions, but I was trapped in the guest house for 128 days. Not much to do. I watched the stars. I watched the sunsets. In between power outages and losing internet. And the first half of my trip, I had no air conditioning either. Which meant the mosquitoes would infest every sunset. The mosquitoes came out, and more mosquito bites. So it was quite an entertaining time. My social excursion was to play with the doggies of the guest house. So here's two different doggies. And so the one lived with me for a while, and unfortunately got a nasty virus, and actually the one on my shoulder there actually passed away while I was there. So that was my only kind of fun. The wonderful little doggy, I really. But I finally escaped. So IEEE was willing to pay for a plane ticket home. The U.S. State Department started to negotiate special charter flights with the Colombian government. So there's a limited number. So the normal. There's also an app that shows you. This is another fun thing. There's an app that you can download that shows you all the planes in the air, whether it could be commercial or cargo, and you can see which airline it is, where they're coming from, where they're going to, etc. And so all over Colombia, there was hardly any planes, maybe 2 or 3 planes in the entire Colombia country at any given time, and they're always cargo only. But then they started to do these charter flights. I managed through my connections to acquire a bunny suit, essentially a clean room bunny suit of Tyvek, and an N95 filter mask. And I made my way home in middle of July. And I thought I had done everything correctly. I thought I had social distanced. I thought I had taken all precautions. And I came home and I quarantined from my family for 14 days. And on the 13th day, I learned that some of the people I had come into contact with in Barranquilla tested positive for coronavirus. I then contacted my doctor and said, I've been having a little bit of a chest, congestion. And he said, get yourself tested. I tested positive for coronavirus the following day, and towards the end of July. And so I had to quarantine from my family even further. Thank God, knock on wood, my symptoms were reasonably mild. I can't say they were a walk in the park like some people say, but I recovered. I did not need hospitalization, but quite an ordeal. But looking ahead, with some of these newfound monies for the project, not only do I want to build this portable water filtration system, but I also added into it is I didn't like that swimming pool idea. If I'm going to generate all this clean water, I want to store it properly. And so I did some digging and energized some of my contacts around the planet. And this is Oxfam sells a very nice system. It's really a wood frame with a rubber lining, and the rubber does not decompose and contaminate and leach chemicals into the water because it has this galvanized steel frame, so the sunlight never hits the plastic, and so therefore the plastic does not decompose. So this is a much safer system for storage of water. A lot of the storage units in Colombia are using this black plastic, which is probably leaching chemicals into their water supply at all given times. Then, how much time do I have?
Minus 10 minutes.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, I was just going to give a highlight. There's a group here in Columbus, Ohio, that was triggered by Carl Lee, who's the current chairman of the Columbus section. And as you know, he made an application for IEEE site, which was funded and highlighted as part of the coronavirus funding by IEEE. Here it was highlighted in IEEE Spectrum. And we're working with a number of stakeholders here in the community. I think some might be on the call. And so we've kind of tentatively called it Lee's Microfarm in honor of Carl Lee's father. And this is some of the stakeholders here. We've got Carl, Amy, John Schrock, I think, is on the call, myself, and these are some of the slides and so forth. And then I'll just jump ahead. This is kind of trying to do an urban farm, for the food desert of Milo Grogan. I'm going to fast forward a little bit and just talk about a little bit other. So another key takeaway is it's not the essence of providing solar power, but what can the community accomplish? So the solar projects we used to do in Haiti have really kind of worked up the learning curve, and it's not just delivering electricity, but what jobs can be created with this newfound electricity. And so this is a new business plan that was working with the IEEE Smart Village. I got co-opted for this, and I'm working with so Kumba is to do always as much as we can in the way we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited it. And so we're working with there's me. Robin Podmore is the co-founder of IEEE Smart Village. Working with John Nelson, the president of IEEE Smart Village, Rajan Kapoor, the senior vice president of IEEE Smart Village. One of the things they want to do is, so a lot of the land gets raped of minerals and raw materials in these communities. And so they're trying to build a business plan where we're gonna try and train local artisans in Africa to refine these raw materials instead of going through all these intermediaries that make all the profit margins, and the local villages there get very little benefit. So what we're trying to do is build a gemstone cutting school and to train local artisans, and then through the network you can buy a gemstone directly from them. And it would be almost like when you do an adopt a child. Here you would see a little photo. You would learn about and it would be a female owned business. You would learn about the female artisan who's going to be creating your work of art, your jewelry, and you would learn about them. You'd learn about their family, and you would know how your purchase is making a difference, allowing their child to go to school and things like that. And so it'd be a win-win-win-win situation. So really, the final key takeaway is, pay it forward in all these endeavors, and to enter everything with open mind and to listen, always listen. So thank you. Any questions?
Well, let's talk about shutdowns, but forget about that.
It's been unmuted. Unmute yourself.
I think several people are talking at once, so I didn't hear any of that. Can we?
Yeah, I just remuted everyone. If anyone has anything they need to say, then unmute yourselves and then speak what you need to say.
Okay, Paul, can you hear me?
Yes, John. Is that John?
First, habari yako? That's in Swahili for how are you?
Ah. That doesn't ring a bell. Maybe that's
habari yako. And the only other, for some strange reason, the only other word I know is cabarito, which means matches. I don't know why I know that, but anyway, I had a couple of questions while people are getting ready for their questions. Is this project limited to only OSU students, or can the other students in the local universities participate?
The project with Tanzania is through a actual class that I teach, so that is only OSU students. And because the OSU students said no to participating in the project in Colombia, I'm using the IEEE students in Universidad del Norte. So that's really, I'm the only Ohioan participating in that project. So the Colombia project is also divorced from Ohio, and even divorced from Ohio State other than me. The project here in Ohio, I think, is still in a state of flux, but yes, we do envision students potentially participating there as well. And the project in Zambia that is being we're just having WebEx meetings every other Saturday. That I do anticipate using local students. I do not see them having to be OSU students. They could be DeVry students. But one of the things we want to be able to do is have students design a system so that they can take the raw rock, the raw stone that is brought out of the earth. We want to develop a way to inspect the quality of that remotely. So we want to generate the electrical engineering being able to analyze what it is. So basically, we need to be able to be remote gemologists. So I wanted to work with a team of students to be able to design the necessary tools that we could deliver to the school so they could analyze these and send back the data and the photographs that would be representative of the gemstone quality before the cutting process started to begin.
Thank you. This was a fascinating presentation. I hope we get a chance some other time, maybe reschedule to hear more about it. But my last question is there any good MOOC or any online course on solar system in general that would be beneficial to students? I know of an international solar system, but anything that you recommend?
Not that I've come across. We're kind of bootstrapped to everything that we've done at the system level. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but I introduced a new laboratory at OSU that has been taught 3 or 4 iterations now. And there I take students at the basic building block levels, more amenable to my core technical work. And there we have trained students how to build solar cells from scratch. So at the materials to the device level. So there they build a silicon solar cell from scratch. And we also build a plastic solar cell from scratch, from beginning to end, and test and measurement.
Thank you. Audience, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions. No questions? I see Mr. Ben Mehraban is online. Ben, if you need something to say about the PES or PACE, any announcement, please unmute yourself and let us know. Well, I guess not. Okay, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your presentation and the time you took to create these slides and your presentation. Like I said, we'd like to hear more about your adventures, and this is absolutely fascinating. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. You're very, very welcome. And I'm easy to reach. You can usually Google and find me somewhere. So I'm easy to follow up. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Fibel. Good evening. This is the end of the presentation. Again, we will have another presentation in about 2 weeks, and the announcements should be shortcoming. So have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care. Happy debate.
Yeah, happy debate night. That started 24 minutes ago.
I'm DVRing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye, Howard.
Why is it not?